Should I split up channels? So here is the thing. I do have a lot of interests. This is me. And all these interests, the idea was to just talk about them. So whenever I would have something interesting to share, I would just document it for myself, but also for other people who would be potentially interested, and then basically funnel it to them. So I would create different channels that have different interests or that are based on different topics. One of these, for example, health. One of these, building this system here, which is this channel, and a few other ones. So now, currently, I do have one channel for one specific interest. Let's say this here is what I consider at least my hobby or work or whatever. If this turns into something that is actually financially kind of making me income, then this obviously could be called a business. Currently, it is not really. So now, out of all these different things, there are subtopics. So one of these subtopics, for example, I recently had is on my health channel. Usually I would just record whatever is connected to health and just put it onto this channel. So if this is now just my health channel, usually all of the content went on here. This also led to the effect that a lot of things would be a little bit different. So the content would be slightly different. If I have a short video, for example, here about biological age, then the next thing here is not about biological age, but it is a recipe, because it's just me recording what I ate for the day or how I cook this, or if there is something special about this, then I might just record it as well. So having these two next to each other led to the effect that many people would be interested, for example, in the recipe, and a few hundred people watched a short of me. This is what protein eggs look like, but on the other side, the target group was probably not really the same in regards to then being interested in biological age, for example. So what this led to me is realizing that I have to split up the channels probably more to individualize basically different topics more. Now, what this means is that the backend, because if I have then, I already have like 10 to 12 to 15 to maybe 20 different channels, depending on how active you see them. Now, the more channels I create, obviously the more backend I have. I have them dozens of email addresses and dozens of channels I have to log in and out of. And since not many platforms offer these kind of multi-logins, this becomes very complicated. So now this video should discuss the question of how to potentially split up one channel, now not into topics, but into different kinds of formats. Because something else I realized is that if I, for example, record this here, and then the next thing is me screen recording on my notebook in a specific software. So this is, for example, the software you could use in order to screen record something. Then this also is a huge deviation in terms of the interest and in terms of the topic. So another thing to think about is the format itself. Of course, now the format itself is in both cases differently, but also the topic is somewhat differently. But here it's more the format. So if I screen record on my notebook and I have this format where I'm here and I explain things on this whiteboard here, or on this whiteboard alternative, then what becomes apparent, I think, is that these are two different kinds of formats. And maybe, so here's an idea to maybe think about, or an idea I thought about how a channel should be in terms of the topics and the format. What if every single contact point, so if this is your YouTube channel here, what if every single contact point on this channel represents your channel? So if somebody sees a short here, it would be a very similar kind of content to a long format video, which would also be here. So I already kind of implemented this with the format of the video itself. So all my videos are usually in portrait, and this means there is basically no difference between me recording 60 seconds and then it's a short, or me recording the same format for YouTube, which then allows people to just not switch in between the watching modes, so they don't have to rotate their phone, which was the idea I tried to implement, and I basically, up until this point, recorded most of my videos in portrait for this specific reason actually. Spotify recently made implementation or designed their UI differently, so now it's more similar to TikTok, and this is also kind of plays into this strategy again, which is not, it plays into this, it's favorable for my strategy, which I already implemented, because I recorded all of these videos now for years, basically, for the last 1 or 2 years, in the hopes of then having people that actually watch them also vertically, because it just would be easier. You hold your phone this way anyway. If you are cooking and you're putting your phone somewhere like this, also you can't just have your phone like this and put it onto a glass, for example. But if you have it down here, then the viewing angle, for example, is more like this. But if you have it here, then you can just have it almost vertical and then just use something to lean against. So also in this regard, I think it might be potentially better. Another factor is that you can just use the vertical video and then just clip out shorts, basically, which you cannot do in the other one, because then you have to either crop in or zoom out, basically. So now, here is the idea. Every item on a channel should ideally represent the channel itself. So this video here on the channel you are seeing, it should be very similar to a short, for example. So now, again, if this is YouTube, if this is Facebook, if this is any other site, then everything should be kind of similar in terms of the style. Because in terms of expectation and in terms of then what the viewer actually gets, it should just be a very close match. Because then if the viewer gets the thing he or she expected, then the algorithms also maybe kind of can just adapt better to the style of content I actually want to make on these different channels. So in an ideal world, basically you would just create all the videos and then you would have some algorithm in the backend who would just categorize all your different videos depending on what you actually said, what the video looks like. This might come in the future, but currently it is not, so you have to do it manually, and spread all the content out across these different channels. Because let's face it, you don't want to see a cooking video as the next video following this here. So there is a huge argument already to separate maybe health and this other one. And what I did with the health channel, I just separated now out the cooking videos or the nutrition videos. Now the next question is obviously, should I just focus on recipes on there? Because if I focus on recipes, then it's a niche kind of. But if I also then talk about protein powder, but if the protein powder then is kind of in the recipe and I have another video that is maybe longer where I unbox the protein powder, what does this then fit together? Now, the ideal world is a world in which every group of videos. So the question obviously is, when is the cutoff point? So if I, for example, make one video, then of course it doesn't make sense to create one channel for this one video. Just because I recorded this one video, it doesn't make sense to have one channel. So what I am thinking of in terms of the bigger concept behind this is this. It's basically a funnel. In the top here is what I think about. Now, what I think about is a few different things, and these few different things then can be kind of spread into these different. So basically the top of the funnel is my mind. That's what I'm trying to say. And then if I trickle this down, so everything comes in here into the funnel. This is my mind. Of course, there's a lot of inputs that are going on, and then it funnels down. Now, all of these ideas that come out here need to be separated. And the question is, how much should you separate them? And now, again, stated already, it doesn't make sense for one video to create one channel just for this one video. So there needs to be a certain frequency where similar ideas appear. And this frequency basically then is dictated, or if the frequency where these ideas appear. So let's say I have another video about health, I have another video about this channel here, or this channel system I'm trying to build, this network of channels I'm trying to build, then these videos need to happen in a certain frequency, because otherwise the channel doesn't have any content in a certain frequency. So this kind of needs to match. Now, obviously, the more channels I have, the more content I need to create, given a certain frequency of content appearance on these channels. So basically a given posting schedule. What I have thought about in the past is, for long videos maybe once a week, and for short videos daily. But I couldn't really keep up with all these different kinds, but also I wasn't really as productive as I possibly could have been. So there is always this thing, what does actually match the reality of what I'm recording, and what would be the ideal thing. So now the cutoff point, I think, is if I cannot produce a video in a certain amount of time for a specific channel, then it doesn't make sense to have the channel. But the much bigger constraint currently is that I can only manage so many channels. Mentally, but also on the different systems I'm currently using. So if I, for example, record for an entire week and there is this one topic and I do not have a new video for this one topic or channel or interest, then I think over the long time it just not make sense to have this channel active. On the other side, what is the big downside? If you keep this one channel also active, maybe in the future you will be interested in this one topic more. Let's take health for example again. Maybe I do skate in the future and maybe I then make videos about skating, and the video about skating should not be next to the video about cooking ideally. So it would make sense to kind of separate this channel out, but maybe then I fall out of skating again and then the channel is dead. So the ideal channel is something that stays with me over time, because then I make videos about this over time because of this funnel system, and this is kind of what I'm thinking about in terms of the channel. But now back to the system to then possibly create different formats on one channel. So here is the idea. You have this one channel, and this channel could be this here. And then there are different formats on this channel. And now back to the idea that everything on the channel itself, every piece of content should ideally be very similar to each other, then it would make sense to have different formats. But now another thing to think about, or another idea to think about, would be this. If you find yourself, or if I find myself wanting to make playlists on YouTube in order to categorize the different formats, then it is maybe time to create a different channel. Why? Because then you would have already different kinds of formats and then it just gets confusing. Ideally, maybe a channel should be a playlist of short and long videos. So there are these two different kinds of formats on one channel, but they are just the different lengths. But the format is actually the same. But if I now have multiple playlists on YouTube with multiple kinds of videos, let's say these are vlogs and these other ones are screen recordings of me talking about certain apps, and these other ones are cooking videos, then it just doesn't make sense anymore because it's just confusing for everybody who visits the channel. The message should be clear. If you go on this channel, then you see me trying to establish this system. If you go onto this other channel, then you are seeing me talking about my health, trying to improve my health, and so on and so forth. So what I'm thinking about is, how can I make a system? How can I create a system where I can also have different kinds of formats? And for the last years now, I thought about this system. I do also want to write blog posts. And if I write a blog post, then the blog post isn't a video. But videos are more engaging, and also podcast is possibly more engaging because it stimulates kind of more input. It has the audio and the video, so the visual input and the audio component. If I now have a blog post, the idea in the past was to just screen record it probably, or maybe, and then I would have a video which would be also in portrait mode, and then I could post this video onto my main channel basically. But if I now have these scripted videos, which also take a lot longer to make because I cannot just talk off the cuff, then these are kind of two very different formats. The one is where you just listen to my voice, and I might also alter my voice slightly in order to improve basically the audio experience, compared to me speaking, where I value authenticity maybe slightly more, and there should not be a mismatch between what I'm saying here and I just should appear as a normal human compared to me trying to talk like a speaker. Sometimes you see these videos of speakers online and they are trying to use their normal speaking voice all the time, which also could be fine, and it probably works if you don't alter it too much. But back to this here. So then I would have these videos, which would maybe be a blog post about something with images embedded. Now, of course, now the better alternative to a blog post and to a blog post screen recorded with images embedded would be to have a video, which is like this, and then there would be actually footage embedded. But footage embedding is a process that requires a lot of time. So if I take this video, for example, and I don't stop in between, then the time I actually record this video is the time that actually the video also takes in terms of playback. In terms of production, this is huge, I would say. And this is the thing that actually allowed me to produce this many videos. Due to perfectionism and also due to a lot of other factors, if I hadn't forced myself to just record one-on-one and accept that these videos in the beginning especially will be crappy, and also every few days if I don't speak English a lot, then they will also suffer in quality. But this is what allowed me to produce this many videos, to produce this many shorts. I just press start and then press stop again, and that's the video. It's such a basic concept. But I mean, think about normal interaction in real life. Does the teacher constantly edit himself? No. He just talks to the students, and he just talks for 45 minutes. He might use a whiteboard like this. Of course, a teacher is just one example, and you could also enhance what the other person is seeing by showing them visuals. But recording like this is basically emulating or simulating the normal conversational format we already have in real life, so therefore it's not that big of a thing. Of course, the expectation might be different because people expect things to be more animated, to have more visuals, but that's something else, I guess. So I could try to make Wendover production style videos, and this is actually something I kind of want to do, but on the other side I know that I cannot really, because then I would have probably 100 times the time investment per video. Now, therefore, I kind of stuck with this format of maybe writing a blog post every now and then, and on the other side I distinguish between short and long. So a blog post is basically something that is longer than a tweet, and a tweet is the short form of the text. Now, in terms of video, of course, you have on almost every platform now 0 to 60 seconds, so up to 1 minute is the short version of a video, and then you also have the long version of a video, which in my case, again, there is no big difference apart from the length. On Twitter and on Medium, which are the two platforms I use for short posts and for long posts, visually based or text based, there is obviously a difference, because on Twitter you might use things in order to abbreviate the language, where on Medium you just don't. So maybe it might make sense in the future to also have the same format here, because tweets are kind of a specific format, but the differentiation between those two should just be how long they are, in terms of how long this text needs to be said and how long this text needs to be said in also the long form. So now I do have the blog post, and I do have to obviously write them before. But the question is then, what kind of format should I use? And I answered this differently in the past. I also experimented a little bit. So what I've experimented with are basically these two formats I already told you about. So I told you already about the first one, which is I have my phone and a screen recorded, and I record the audio, and I basically just read the blog post. Now, there are a few downsides to this format. It might be not as engaging, but it has also the benefit that I don't need to appear in the video, which might be a benefit given that there is obviously some risk if you say something online. Now, of course, this would kind of still be connected to me, and it would also obviously be my voice. Nonetheless, there is an argument to be made not to involve yourself so much in the videos. But on the other side, currently this is just the leanest video production possible, and so therefore I'm just including myself and using myself, basically the image, the physical appearance of myself. What I've experimented with is to have my phone here and to then just read the same blog post without the embedded images. But this of course then loses the embedded images. I could embed these images if I then go back and embed them in a video editor, but that's not what I'm trying to spend my time on. What I'm trying to spend my time on is to get better at speaking, because that's the biggest lever. That also potentially turns me maybe into a good interviewer or a good podcaster in the future, even though the skill is obviously different slightly, because you need to listen to somebody and then interact with this person, whereas this is just a monologue. It's unidirectional conversation, you could say. So now the format I experimented with is having the blog post up here and then just reading it. Now there are obviously two different kinds of formats, sub-formats you could say. The one is where you look kind of off and it's obvious that you're reading, and the other one is where you kind of try to trick the audience into reading on the screen, which then maybe looks like this, and you potentially could see the eyes move. But nonetheless, this is how many videos these days are produced. News are produced kind of this way. They have a teleprompter in front of them, and then they are just reading from the teleprompter, and often they use basically a mirror, so they would have something that is transparent like this here, and the camera would basically film through this, and they would kind of see it. Not like this directly, but similar to this. So, format option 1 to turn my blog posts into videos would be to still do the screen recording. And I think that's actually what I'm probably going with. Why? Because this is a format I already tested, and this is a format I already have a few videos recorded on actually. Now, one problem is that it takes a lot of time to record these videos, and also the acceptance of quality is a little bit skewed. If I just read to you, then it is, I think, kind of less accepted that I have an arm here and there, for example. So it should be better in terms of the quality. If I read for 20 minutes, and I usually, at least in the past, if I have a blog post that lasts 20 minutes of reading, then I try to take it in one take. And if I make mistakes, then either they are in there, or I can at max maybe record one time again. But if I record for 20 minutes and then I ditch the whole video because I don't want to edit the video, and that's the only, I of course can start and stop now on the phone, which in the beginning I didn't really realize. But then if I ditch these 20 minutes, then these 20 minutes of my work are just entirely gone. Of course, the next 20 minutes of recording this might be better, but in terms of time investment, this is not ideal, I guess. In terms of time investment, what would be ideal is if I just recorded one video after the other. If I had the skill to just record one after the other, but I currently do not have it again. So this is something I need to train for a few weeks, and then I kind of have it, or I get at least better at it, at reading something without making constantly reading mistakes, for example. So now, the two options would be, again, talking head, similar to this, but reading. Or I record screens. Now, I think I will go with the screens. And this is kind of the reasoning now, because I can also record tweets. So I would just go on Medium, for example, which is the blogging platform I use, or on Twitter. And then what I additionally can use is I can embed images and screenshots. And also in terms of general production, if I want to make a video about deadlifting, for example, I could, of course, go into the gym and record there, which has a lot of privacy issues. Now, a few other constraints for this whole thing here, this whole project. If I record footage, and let's go back to deadlifting, and I record maybe 10 second clips, the question obviously is also how long should these clips be? Should I record 1 minute clips of me? The thing is then, for this one video I would then maybe make in the future, which I haven't made yet, I then would have all of these clips. And now the question is, when should I delete them? Should I delete them? Should I record them in 4K? Should I record them in 1080p? What I decided for myself is I would have 1080p basically as the standard for the videos. And the videos should at least be made in the same day. So if I record all of this footage and I turn it into a video, then this takes maybe an hour. Then maybe my video software crashes. These are just a lot of factors. And what I also then need is the storage. This is probably 10 times or 50 times or 100 times the amount of storage I need. Currently, I record this video, it's in 1080p, it's recorded on my phone, so it's kind of a low compression, which means a video like this has maybe 1 or 2 gigabytes. So currently I have in total, I think, 16 gigabytes of storage. No, it's actually 20 gigabytes of hard drives. I have 4 times a 5 terabyte drive, and this is where I store all of these files currently on. Now, these are running out of storage, but let's just imagine I had 50 times the storage need. I would have to buy stuff, and this also would get a lot more expensive. So here's the idea. If I instead record not video footage, but just images, and then write blog posts, or tweets, and then I turn it into a more or less static video, then I have all of these maybe different situations. It's obviously then just not moving, but in terms of production, it's just a lot easier. And I don't need to buy tons of hard drives, and thereby increase the cost of producing these videos. So what I'm trying to say here is, instead of maybe recording footage of something, maybe I just take a picture of something. And that's also a lot less disturbing for everybody else. If I run around in the gym like this all the time, or everywhere I go where I just want to record something, compared to just me recording an image of something, taking an image of something, this is somebody everybody does. So it's also not apparent that I do this thing and then make videos out of it. Compare this to somebody doing a grocery haul video, and then they record in the grocery store. If maybe they have even a big camera, then of course it's kind of obvious they are producing a video. So what I'm thinking about is now this. I do have on every channel, at least, that is a channel on its own, could be a certain topic, has a certain topic. I do have the main videos, which are me talking. Of course, these could also be seen not as the main videos. I kind of call them share, because it's just me sharing, basically, similar to a conversation, similar to a podcast maybe. In a podcast, what is the thing? Is person one, and person one says something, and then person B says something. The best podcasts are the ones where the host actually just is an active listener, you could say, maybe even passive, because what the host actually acts as in a podcast setup, if you have two people, is he just directs basically the person. The host is kind of a director. He asks the right questions, question 1, question 2, question 3, in order to keep the whole thing rolling and keep the whole thing interesting. So you could just leave out the second person and be the passive active listener, be the audience already, and then you have a monologue, which is kind of this video. So this video format is kind of based on podcasting, kind of, you could say. Kind of. But only kind of. So the main videos, or what I actually kind of currently see as the main videos, are then these. The next format then would be me reading what I wrote. So tweets currently, or short posts and long posts. And I then would turn these into, again, shorts and longs. The tweets are the shorts and the long videos are the long videos, also in 16:9, but just screen recording. I actually already experimented with this. In the beginning of many of my channels, I just posted these videos. So I just wrote stuff instead of telling the stuff on camera already, and then I would just screen record them. So I already have a few of these older blog posts at least screen recorded in this format. So there might be other formats. If I talk about health on one channel, then I might also create kind of a sister channel, which would be actually a podcast. Because instead of, so the main theme here is that I switch, that the topic is the same, but the format is different. So here I talk about health. Here it's me talking about health, but it's written and you have just a visual in front of you and not me. Of course, I could use a kind of blend in between those two, and I could record this voiceover, for example, and then add visuals, but this also just increases my production cost per video. The third format then would be a show, and so let's maybe write this down here. Show. What would be the show? It's me interviewing guests. So this serves a few different purposes. So of course, if I take into account that maybe AI in the future will also be better, so therefore the research part and the part where you learn stuff might be actually kind of outsourced to artificial intelligence, or just to normal data, or just to any system that can actually show you data you need at a certain point in time, compared to asking people that are currently kind of the best sources. So if you have any given topic and you have just a person that is specialized in this topic, then the person itself understands the context probably better than you could Google. And that's the kind of idea. It's an expert. Maybe in the future, digital experts might be better, so then the whole concept of the show might not be that relevant anymore. But at the same time, what a show at least would allow me to do is to ask the questions I otherwise already ask, but at the same time offer the person I'm interviewing some benefit, and it's giving them a platform. So I would basically kind of selfish ask the questions I would already have. So maybe on my health channel, for example, I could maybe interview somebody like Thomas de Lauer at one point, maybe not, who knows, but if I could ask him the questions I would ask, or maybe the audience also would be interested in, then it's kind of a win-win for me and for the audience, I guess. That's at least the idea. Now, podcasting in terms of the production would then be the outlier. Why? Because the sharing videos is just me recording, starting and stopping. So it's just one take, basically. Sometimes I have to merge files because the battery goes out from my phone. Now, this format, the code format, is also similar. It's one take recorded, and if there are mistakes in it, I usually just delete it, or I don't. And in the past, I had the policy to just not keep files that are not posted. So if I have a file and I do not post it online, I have to delete it. I now also kind of accepted that I have kind of a private archive in which I can input footage. But of course, the bigger this archive grows, the more storage I again need. Now the show format is a little bit different. Why is the show format different? Because there is no very easy solution for just start and stop and go without editing. What I've thought about is this. If you, for example, there is one podcast which is called Chris Williamson. In the past it was called the Modern Wisdom. What he kind of established is that he just has a setup, a fixed setup, and then he has a setup that just looks very nice, and then he just does almost 90% of his podcasts over Zoom. Now, this obviously has become more and more apparent over the pandemic. People did a lot of Zoom podcasts. There is also a software called Riverside, which would then allow me to do the following. So, the basic problem of the podcast is that you have two people, and these two people need to be in frame whenever they speak, but not in a very static way, but in a way how you would also look. So if you would look at these people, and then the camera should not cut whenever somebody speaks, but actually cut whenever somebody would look. So you would maybe linger onto one person a little bit longer and then only move to the other person. Or if a person interjects something like, aha, then you would not go like this, even though newer podcasting formats do kind of go in between the speakers a little bit faster. So now, here's the basic podcast setup many people use. That's actually kind of something I thought about because I just listened to a podcast and then I saw kind of the back end of it. You have two people talking maybe on a table. Then you have camera one, which is here, which is the wide angle, which takes this here. Then you have a camera here, which just records usually this person, like this. And then you have a camera here, which records this person. So basically you have three cameras. And you now need to switch in between those cameras. And now this is the physical setup, but you could also have the same thing digitally. It's similar. Either you have person 1 in frame, either you have person 2 in frame, or both combined. So now, in terms of the format of video, and in terms of 16:9, this means that either you have person 1 full frame, you have person 2 full frame, or you have both in the middle. Now, having both in the middle is not a very good solution because it's not that engaging and it's not really following you. Of course, you then can follow, but what you want to follow is basically downsized. It's basically just half the size that it could be, because usually you would just look at one person anyway. So therefore, enlarging the person that is speaking makes sense. Now this creates the problem that you need to smartly switch in between those, or intelligently switch in between these three different cameras. And this is something now software can increasingly do. So what Riverside ideally would do is they would identify the speaker and then match the video feed. So you would have basically two different video feeds. So two people would maybe have their phone set up. And I already tried this as a phone setup with Riverside. So you can register basically both phones. There is a companion app for your phone. And then you can have one person here and the other person over there. And then they would smartly change the camera. What this then would allow me to do is also to have my lean production in this podcasting format. Apart from the fact that I might want to meet people in person, if I don't want to meet people in person, then this would be a very easy format. And this, for example, is maybe partially would allow Chris Williamson to record this many podcasts. Because every time you go to a person or the person goes to you, there is a huge transportation cost attributed to recording this 1 or 2 hours of podcast. But if the two people just can stay in their homes and just work remotely with each other and just record, ideally with better and better setups, then this whole thing can be made digital. Of course, then the big downside is that you do not get to know the person in real life, which might not form as strong of a bond. So if you're trying to do a podcast, or I am trying to do a podcast in order to increase my network and actually get to know maybe a few of the people I admire in certain aspects, then this might not be that beneficial. But on the flip side, you might be able to get to know a lot more people because you are able to produce 10 times as many episodes. So this is what I'm thinking of in terms of the production of the show. It would be lean, probably, so as lean as possible, and the only thing that would allow me to also have this thinking of, okay, I press record and I press stop and then I have the finished files, would be kind of Riverside. Riverside also has another option, which would be, so the question for me obviously would be, should I then also record in portrait? Because that's kind of the rule I set up for all the different formats and all of the different channels, that I record everything in portrait. Why? Because I then can clip it out. And especially with podcasts, again, it would make sense if I then could just clip out clips for TikTok, for Instagram, Reels, and so on and so forth in portrait format. So the options would be to have the image, and instead of switching from here to then split screen and to then full screen again, the three different angles, what would also be possible is to just switch this. And then person one, very conveniently in this format, so in this DIN A4 format, is kind of the same as the normal wide angle. But on the phone it's not so much. It's more like a square, because modern phones actually are more like 18:9 compared to 16:9. So what could be happening is that Riverside switches basically to a full screen view of the person, then has both people at the same time, or also a full screen view of the person, which then is not optimized for watching a podcast on TV, for example, which might be the big downside. Also on a notebook, for example, or on a computer, it would be kind of very hard to follow this. But at the same time, I think the last number I read is that almost 60% or more of content is consumed on the phone, so it would just make sense, I think, to concentrate the thing you're trying to make onto watching it, or to optimize it for watching it on your phone. I certainly do watch like 95% of the content I watch on my phone. So if I use myself as a proxy for the ideal audience, which I think makes sense to a certain extent, then it would also mean that I would produce on my phone, for my phone, in portrait. Now currently, what is the main channel is basically the sharing format. The sharing format is me sharing things in a conversational style, maybe with visuals, maybe I show something on my phone, but I don't have anything else on here. What I also can do, what I also tried already in the past, because I do have a 2-in-1 in some aspects, specifically for this reason, that I can basically digitally show you something. So screenshots on my phone, I can just display here, and then it's almost a third of the screen here. And this is also something I can do, and that do not have the focusing issue of the phone that much. If I put the phone on here, then it doesn't properly focus often, at least on my current devices. So I could potentially also upgrade my camera. Then the code format allows me still to write. It allows me to improve my writing. Maybe in the future, I mean, I thought many times about this, but maybe I just want to write something longer than a blog post. Of course, I am also kind of seeing tweets as well as the blog posts as kind of improving my writing, similar to how I'm currently trying to improve my speaking with this sharing format, in order to maybe in the future be kind of a normal interviewer and not a totally bad interviewer, and then maybe establish the show. Of course, I also have to find guests for my show, but I thought about this quite some time, and I think both kind of incentives. So the two different objectives of having guests on my show and meeting interesting people in real life is kind of a perfect merger, because the people I want to have on my show obviously are then maybe already known in their regards, or have a very interesting idea they wrote a book about, and I might actually want to dive into this idea. And because I am running this show, I can choose the guests, so I can choose whatever interests me, similar to how I choose whatever interests me in my personal life, and then as a trickle-down effect just make some videos about the most interesting things, or the things I want to document for myself, maybe if I then take again myself as a proxy, and I then can also just create a show. If I met this one interesting person, and the one interesting person is open to do a podcast, which obviously a lot of people aren't, then I could just record this interview of myself, for myself, but also for everybody who wants to listen. This is kind of the idea. And it would basically intertwine. If you take Chris Williamson again, or Lex Friedman, for example, these people are now, in terms of networking, on a completely other level, you could argue. Of course, there are people who make business deals in the back end, but just the sheer diversity, or the sheer variety also, of the guests that appeared on the Lex Friedman show, and he now is in contact, for example, with Elon Musk or with people like this, then I think it also from a personal stance makes sense to just try to get to know these people. I, for example, would like to get to know maybe people like Richard Dawkins before they eventually die in 10 or 20 years, or depending on how long they still live. But if I could see them face to face, would mean, I think, a lot to me. And if I offer them something, like I have a show, and it's also a good show, and it's not just any show, and I do ask interesting questions, or I just listen, or I do have basically the best podcasting, not the best, but the best I can live up to at this specific point in time, the best standard of podcasting I can live up to, then this might also be beneficial not only for this part as a channel, as a brand, as something that potentially makes money, but it also would just be very beneficial for my personal own development. And then I think I have one other format that is currently not available. Now, something else to maybe discuss is that out of all of these things, these are basically just the native channels. What I could also do is, if I have all of these channels, let's say it's 3, is I could create additional clips channels. If I have this video, and this video here lasts for 45 minutes, then what I also could do is I can create clips. And again, I can just create a new channel, and let's just say, okay, I have this video, which already is in portrait. Then I can just say, okay, how about I just create a short out of this? This, for example, could just be a short. Anything I say could be a short. It just has to be kind of a sentence that makes sense on its own. And then maybe I could also link the video and then again link back to the main channel. But what this means is that I could clip out longer clips, like Lex Friedman does on his podcast, for example. He clips out maybe 2 minutes to 10 minutes of video often, and Joe Rogan also does this. Or I could also create shorts. So basically the short and long format on the clips channel then would just be cutouts. This would be a duplicate channel, so not a native channel, not with original content, but a duplicate channel. I already tested this to some degree, so I do also make a little bit of music, or I at least try to make a little bit of live music. And I basically recorded maybe 2 or 3 minutes of the main video, and then I would just clip out very interesting, or not very interesting, things that could stand on their own. And since music is made out of different beats and so on, you couldn't just cut out maybe 4, for example, and then it works also on its own, and you can kind of play it infinitely, which was a very interesting thing. I posted this onto my main music channel, but my music channel, for example, is another story, because I think I need to also separate all the different kinds of things I make, because otherwise the variety of stuff on one channel is just too big. So this is kind of the thinking, and I recorded this already multiple times. It's just that the implementation of it is just such a big thing, because if I already have like 12 of these, and then I now need to create these in order to basically record my blog post, and I also would like to make, ideally, maybe something like a Netflix documentary style production video, but it's just that that's very high risk. Of course, it might also come with a much higher reward, but I would probably 100x the time I need for one video or for one topic. So let's say in total then I have 20 channels of this here, or let's just say 15 for the sake of it. Then this would mean 30 channels per platform. Of course, if I am on multiple platforms, it again multiplies by the platforms I am on. Now, if I have also the show, then I already have 45 channels. If I now... oh man, this is just so nuts. So this already would be 45 channels, with 3 sister channels, basically, within one brand umbrella. If I then create a clips channel for basically everything, it doubles it. But let's go back to this one here. 45. This would then make 90. And if I then have these channels on multiple platforms, of course it would be kind of the same account, but on multiple platforms, then I would have to manage channels on platforms. Let's say I have 3 platforms, then it would be 270 channels. The 3 platforms being YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. If I also now want to post on TikTok, then this would mean that I need at least to post the short videos. Maybe if TikTok decides to extend their videos even more than 10 minutes, then I can post all the videos, also the longer ones, once onto TikTok. And then I would have even more. 360 channels to be exact. The problem is that it multiplies, and that's what I'm currently kind of unable to solve, have been unable to solve for weeks. But I have already written a few new blog posts, And I also do think it kind of makes sense to just have a blog post, because a video, especially in conversational style, I cannot embed a reference here. Of course, I can link it down in the description, for example, but I cannot, in the video itself, embed another source that is me. I can only describe words with this here, with maybe pictures on my phone, but I cannot link the actual data. In a blog post, I can just input a link, for example, and then the link is actually kind of clickable, at least if you click on the blog post. But I cannot create blog posts for all the talking videos I do, because again, then per video, the production cost would be significantly higher.